It had been 5 decades since the wall had first been discovered. Even though calling it a wall is not necessarily true, a barrier makes much more sense. An invisible force that does not allow anything inside of it to traverse through it. We would probably never even have learned of it if it hadn't been for the failed expedition to Ross 248 system, which was just outside the 10 light-year confinement. We had mastered true spaceflight back in 2249, with ever-improving engines, shortening the massive journeys between the other stars and planetary systems on our side of the wall massively. We only reached Ross 154 in 2372, it being the furthest star within our relative space. We had never even suspected something could, nor would, hold us back, for we had found no sign of intelligent life, no ruins, no biological life beyond that of critters, and nothing to show that the universe was not completely up for grabs, until that day. It had been a routine science operation. My father had often told me of both when I was a small kid, and many times later in my teens and until his deathbed. 2 crewed ships loaded with 20 observation drones. Each was to be sent out to the new star system, confirm the suspicions of a large planetoid near Ross 248, which was something that was first believed to be uninhabitable. But from new studies from Ross 154, or the now more common name, Kryn system, named after a valuable textile that could be extracted from the fibers of a plant growing on one of the small planetoids in the system. It showed images that did not quite make sense to those seen from other sites, and warranted immediate analysis. It had been smooth sailing, his father always used to say, until they got the unbelievable data back, that both ships had been torn out of hyperspace. A massive blue-green explosion happened, just at the 10 light-year mark. It had been the scientific question of the ages. What could possibly have torn something out of hyperspace? Since in theory, it is a substrata region of space that does not interact with normal space in the same way. For something to stop this went beyond the wildest dreams of my father, and of course any other subspace analyst. For the first 5 years and the birthdays up towards my 12th one in Seoul Standard Time, he had missed every part of family life, devoted to what he had coined the name for, the wall. Hundreds of tests had been made. Thermographic pictures, infrared, even subspace flashes were taken. And for all this, they had found nothing. Nothing. When the horror came, that it was not only in this particular part of space, that the unobstructed part of space had a seemingly invisible barrier allowing no matter to go past it, but it was actually a near-perfect circle, forming an invisible, immeasurable prison, for which no force nor studies could be made. It shook the human race. My father pored over his notes to the point of my mother leaving him. His endless search for the meaning, the reason, and the solution had cost him my mother's affection, and that of my 2 sisters. I didn't see either my mother nor my sisters for almost a decade. They had left the system. Some feared that the wall would shrink in on us, contain us even further, but my father never shared that fear or belief. He thought of it as a test, sure that it had been created for humans to show they were worthy of what might lie beyond. And so, I stayed. I stayed by my father's side, for his endless search of the untouchable, his endless cries of madness as he drank the long nights away in frustration, in the ever-consuming feeling of inadequacy that filled him, as he became more and more isolated, as people more and more grew to believe in the shrinkage of the wall was a sure thing, even though that my father, for 34 years, had done every type of research imaginable, even discovered and invented completely new ways to analyze subspace and how matter transferred from normal space into hyperspace, which led to magnificent breakthroughs in engine development and spectral analysis. But as any other scientist knows, that a problem unsolved is the best and worst thing you can find in life. By the time my father had reached his 87th Seoul Standard year, his mind had regressed so far into his own, from the failure to understand and solve the issue, that he flew into the wall, ending his life and misery the only way he could think logical. To become one with his problem. It was the same day I had finished my doctorate back on Earth. I'd been away for 7 years, working on a new type of engines, one that did not go the usual way of flowing through hyperspace, but quite literally tearing a hole in it. My research had been forestalled twice, in public fear of creating exotic particles that had no place in normal space, which could lead to what some believe was what had first happened in the creation of the universe, a Big Bang event. What I had hoped for was to find funding and finish my research in a 10-year period, but expanded to nearly 15. Undeterred by this, I felt it my duty to free my father of his obsession and humanity of his confines, to tear down the wall that now had held humanity back from the wonders of space. But how wrong I was, I did not know. I still remember it clearly. My team and I had finished the first workable starship with the new engines and done the first tests. Everything worked perfectly, and no trace of exotic particles had been exerted from the first flights. I was confident that in my time, that I, through this ship, could rid humanity of the fear of what might lie beyond. A young man's dream is often misplaced, but no gain comes from such thoughts. By the time of my 43rd birthday, the test was about to be made. Observational satellites have been placed every 0.5 light years from the breaching point, in an effort to record as much data as possible from different angles and distances. I, myself, had taken over the lab of my father's in the Kryn, and chosen, as a memory to my father, the location in which he had flown his ship. Fear, awe, and hope traversed among the ships, planets, and settlements of humanity, as we again were to embark on our greatest journey once more, to breach the heavens and aim for the unreachable stars. I remember it all so clearly, the sheer face of the people around me in the command center, as our ship, New Horizons, flashed out of existence. But no explosion happened, and for a few minutes humanity held its breath, in clear anticipation of the blue-green flash that marked the failure of the mission, even though it should have happened instantly. When the New Horizons came back, unscathed and undamaged, celebration was all that could be heard. We had achieved the unachievable. We had broken our confines and could now expand outwards yet again. A day that will hold me until the end. When we secured the pilots and the data they collected, fear was all that remained. The pilots came back in a state of shock. The look on their faces still sent shivers down my spine. But the message they carried with them was even worse. For humanity had thought of it as a prison, a test, or an act of punishment, but never for what it truly was. A safe haven. For when the pilots breached the barrier, it did not come down as I or my father thought it would. It did not shrink or expand as politicians thought it might. It simply stayed as it was, but now, a hole in it was there. Roughly the size of the gas giant Jupiter, which I have been now blamed to be the cause of, and will go down in history, as the reaper of humanity. The message that was conveyed to the pilots was not one of congratulations, but of warning. Something that, if we had searched more thoroughly in the data of the explosions, rather than of the wall, we would have found it. But now, all that is too late. To all sentience, do not attempt to cross the barrier. We, the Arasi, have formed barriers around this portion of space and few others, as they are still untouched by the hive. For all our technology, for all our might, we failed to stop the invaders. They have torn through every civilization in our galaxy, conquering, absorbing, and remolding the great races to fight ourselves in their endless consumption of life. The barrier is the last offense of civilizations unborn. May you never face their evil, nor our peril. This will be my last entry, for I shall follow my father's footsteps, as I have always done. He left this life thinking he failed humanity. I leave because I know I did. As all scientists know, an unsolvable problem can be the best and the worst thing in life.